I dressed up for y'all. I got my tea. I got my incense going. Okay? This is a special occasion because today we're going to talk about how to make the thoughts stop. Now, this is a hard subject to make a video about because no matter what I say, even if I give literally the best advice ever, someone's still going to be like, it didn't work. Because at the end of the day, whether the thoughts stop or whether they continue is actually 100% up to the individual, up to the person, and nothing no one can say can change the things that go on in your own head, the things that go on in your own mind. So, as much as I can say all of this to help, provide some support, to show you the path, like you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, that kind of thing. And all I can do is share what helped me defeat, for example, my suicidal thoughts, what helped me defeat my self harm thoughts, what helped me defeat certain overthinking habits about people or situations. And I will also say, like, there are still thoughts that I feed that are probably not good for me, probably aren't the best and aren't productive, and I still feed my thoughts sometimes. Like I'm not a 100% healed person. Like I am still an imperfect human and I probably will be for a while. I'm trying my best to be perfect, but guys, like it's a lifelong journey. Healing and enlightenment or peace is prosperity. It's all a lifelong journey, okay? I'm trying my best. I kind of just like the way that it looks when I have this cup in my hand. I don't know if I don't, I like the way it makes me look. Okay, so how to defeat the thoughts. First of all, let's talk about thoughts and the ways that they work and the ways that they manifest. So, this is also completely my opinion and also things that I've learned on my healing journey, on my spiritual path, through research, through talking with therapists, through a whole bunch of things, okay? So, this is just my tips and tricks. First of all, let's talk about what is a thought. I like to think of thoughts as kind of channels that exist that we all have access to. So, channels that kind of exist like above our heads, like in the sky, channels that every single human has access to. And thoughts go by these channels like the channels is where the thoughts live, okay? The channels is where ideas and thoughts exist and live. And so I kind of see us as humans as like we have an ability to like go up into the channel and like grab a thought or grab an idea and then we can bring it down and we can keep it in our head, like bring it down into our head. We can bring it into our heads, keep it there, or we can kind of like manifest the thought into a reality through our actions. And our actions are the only things that can manifest thoughts, take thoughts, alchemize them into reality through actions. And so this is how I believe artists exist as well. I do feel like all artists have access to this like channel, and through the channel specifically that's like about art and creating things, period. And I do believe that all artists have access to these channels, which is exactly the reason why some artists will have an idea that has already been done, or two different artists in two completely parts of the world will have a similar or the same idea, and they will manifest differently or they'll manifest very similarly. Like this is something that Michael Jackson used to say of like, oh yeah, like he would have an idea in the middle of the night and he would go to the studio immediately because he was scared that if he didn't act on that idea right away, then Prince would take the idea for the song. And this is like something that Michael Jackson said, and probably because they were both two innovators at a similar time, and like they both had access to that same channel. And so, like Michael had said, like there were so many ideas that he had that he didn't act on that like would later become a tune in a Prince song or a lyric in a Prince song, you know? And sorry to bring up Michael Jackson. I know he's like a contentious figure these days, but this is just an example of like how thoughts and ideas kind of exist and we're all connected. So we're all connected to this stream of consciousness thoughts, and sometimes they dip into closer to our sphere and then they leave. Like we have the choice sometimes to pick them up or not, but we all have access to these thoughts, which is why like there's kind of no such thing as an independent thought. There's kind of no such thing as like you're the only person to think this specific thing. No, like we all have access to the ability to think similar things because we're all living a human experience that is going to collide in with each other. So thoughts in this way kind of work like if we think of thoughts as like you can think of thoughts in like a lot of these ways. So there's the channel. There's also thinking of thoughts as like steps. Like one thought is one step, and then you take another step, and then you take another step, and all of a sudden you're running with the thought. And this is kind of where like anxiety thoughts kind of come in, of overthinking, of like one thought is one step and then there's another step after that and then there's another and all of a sudden you're running and you don't even know where you're going. You're just running in the direction with this one seed of a thought that has now become multiple thoughts because you're running with it and you're continuing to plant these seeds and like growing a whole plant based off this one seed of a thought. And that's where we get like yeah, like overthinking and like anxiety thoughts. That's kind of how they work, right? They kind of get ahead of us way before we even realize that like we're running. And then thoughts can also be seen as like kind of a river. Like this is what a lot of Buddhists and a lot of meditators, this is kind of the analogy that is used a lot of like a river of like thoughts are just streaming by down the river, and we don't need to grab them. We don't need to like hold on to them and bring all of them close to ourselves, you know? We can allow them to just flow down the river because that's what they are. They're going through the channel, they're flowing down the river. And we don't need to grab on to all of them. Sometimes we can pick one up, and if it's a really good idea, then we can alchemize it and manifest it through our actions to being a tangible thing. But we don't need to do that. At the end of the day, they're just little things that are little plants that are flowing down the stream. And so like this is like how we can understand and conceptualize thoughts and make them a bit more tangible, because when we think, like it can be very overwhelming to think about our thoughts because they happen kind of all the time. Okay. So how do you stop a thought? First of all, we might feel like the first thing that we think of like how to stop a thought is like to ignore it, pretend it's not real, to ignore it and push it away. But that's avoidance. That's avoidance, and that's not really going to help. The thought's always going to come back because if we're running away from a certain thought, eventually it will still chase, like it'll catch up to us when we stop moving, when we stop running, it'll catch up to us and be like, hey, remember this thing that you're like running away from? And then it's back. So running away doesn't help. Trying to push it away, trying to ignore it doesn't really help because it's still going to be there and it's going to catch up to us eventually, just like everything does. So acknowledge acknowledge the thought of like what it is. Let's just take an extreme thought, for example, suicide. Let's just take an extreme case of suicide. Let's say we're thinking about suicide. Okay, acknowledge the thought. Okay, acknowledging I am having this thought right now. I'm having this thought right now. How does this thought make me feel? Okay, it's like creating like a pit in my stomach. It's making like a tightness in my chest. It's making a tightness in my throat. It's giving me a little bit of pressure in my head, maybe a headache. This is the like this is these are the sensations that I'm having because of this thought. These are the feelings that I'm having because of this thought. Okay, why am I having this thought? Okay, well, I'm having this thought because X, Y, and Z, and that's pretty understandable that X, Y, and Z would bring up thoughts like this for me. Pretty understandable, makes sense. Our thoughts always come from a place that like kind of makes sense why we're having that thought. Like it's never like out of nowhere, because again, it's like it's flowing by the river. We have to be at the river for these thoughts to flow by. So it's like it's never out of nowhere. It's always going to have some sort of like, oh, okay, I understand where this thought is coming from. And we don't need to label the thoughts good or bad. They just are. They just are. They exist independently of what we think of them. The thought exists like separate from how we perceive them, how others perceive them, how we think of them. So we don't need to label thoughts as good or bad because it's kind of when we label these thoughts in good or bad ways, we're kind of like taking it away from its essence. Because in essence, thoughts are not good or bad, they just are. Just because I'm thinking about suicide doesn't mean I'm suicidal. Sometimes it does mean that, but sometimes it doesn't. And so there's no good or bad, it just is. And so the first step, acknowledging that we're having a thought, acknowledging where the thought came from, and then not labeling it, not saying like, this is good, this is bad, this means this, these, like, we don't need to understand, we don't need to do all of that work. We don't need to do that. So by not labeling it, we are detaching from it. Because when you label it and you say this is good, this is bad, then we automatically want the good and we don't want the bad. And when we want good and we don't want bad, then we're attaching to these thoughts. And when we attach to a thought, we're strengthening the thought. Every attachment we make to that thought, we're strengthening it. We don't need to strengthen all of our thoughts, especially if we're trying to stop a thought, then we don't need to strengthen it. So by not labeling it, then we are detaching from the thought and we're allowing it to be what it is without me as a human trying to like, every time we say I like or I don't like this, we're attaching to it. And attaching to a thought is kind of like, in a way, like we're kind of colonizing it in a way. So we don't need to do that. We don't need to attach. We don't need to colonize. And I hope you can still hear me because the construction's being kind of annoying. We don't need to. We don't need to attach. So detaching from the thought, detaching from it, not labeling it good or bad, not labeling it anything. Just, okay, it is what it is. And then once we do all those things, we acknowledge, we spend some time like, oh, where did this come from? What is it bringing up in me? How do I feel about it? Take some time acknowledging that. Don't attach to it. Don't say I like it, I don't like it. Just let it be what it is. And then do something else. And then once you take the time to acknowledge what it is, then do something else. Something that can be really helpful is going somatic, going to our body. Okay, how do I feel in my body? How do I feel in my chest? How do I feel in my shoulders? How do I feel in my head? How do I feel in my stomach? How do I feel in my abdomen? How do I feel in my back? How do I feel in my thighs? Like everywhere. Start bringing yourself back to your body of like, how am I feeling in my body right now? Perhaps it might feel good to do some movement, to stretch. Perhaps it feels good to drink some water, eat something. You can do these things for yourself, but you also don't need to do those things. You can also just take a second to be with your body. Be with all the senses all throughout your body. Breathe with your breath. Breathe into all the different spaces in your body. And by doing this, you're already meditating. Once you start doing this, you're meditating. So take some time to meditate, be with your breath here. And at this point, the thought has probably passed, perhaps, and perhaps it comes back. Perhaps you didn't fully let it go. Because if it comes back at this point, if the thought comes back, that's probably because you were feeling like, I don't want it. I don't want to have this thought. I don't want to have this thought right now. And so if you feel that way, you're creating an attachment to the thought and it'll probably come back. If you have the thought like, I don't want this, I don't want to have this, I don't want to feel this, then it'll probably come back because you created that attachment to it. And so because you're attached to it, it will probably come back. And so you can do the same thing again. Do the same steps again. Return back to your body, return back to your senses. Give yourself some medicine. That might be movement, water, food. Maybe it's like doing something with your hands, making art, doing something that's like a neutral kind of coping strategy. Get your mind off of it. And perhaps it'll still come back. Perhaps it's like a compulsive thought. Perhaps it's a compulsion. Perhaps it's a really, really intense, extreme thought. And every time you try to move away from it, it kind of sucks you back in. It comes back quickly. Well, in that case where it's an extreme thought, take your time. Take your time. There's no need to rush the process. Sometimes it'll take shorter, sometimes it'll take longer. Take your time and really give it the time that perhaps it's asking. It's asking to be seen, it's asking to be acknowledged. Give it that time. Something my therapist also said is like sometimes it feels good to just like put some pressure on our head by like squeezing our head, squeezing like this at the front and the back, squeezing at the sides, squeezing our temples, squeezing at the sides here, front and back. Sometimes it feels really good to squeeze our head, have some of that compression, kind of relieving to our brain, especially if there's a lot going on, if we're like overwhelmed or overstimulated. Sometimes it feels good to just have that pressure to relax our head. And really take your time. Create something. Manifest something else. Alchemize it to something else. Perhaps you're having a really like big thought over here. Perhaps you go and do some writing about how you feel. Not just, oh, I'm having this thought and you start writing, I'm having this thought, I'm this is blah blah blah. Like start writing about the thought. Don't write about the thought, actually. If you're having an overwhelming thought, don't write about it. Write about how you feel in your body, the sensations. Write about your senses. I feel this in my body. I see this in front of me. I hear this around. I smell this. Write about the five senses. You could even write about your sixth sense if you want. Sixth sense if you want. But don't feed the thought anymore by writing about the thought. Sometimes it might feel good to write about the thought, but then write about your senses first. Write about your five senses first, and then perhaps you will be more grounded in yourself, in your body, once you do the, five things I can see, touch, hear, whatever thing. You can just name one or two. If you're really intentional about it and you're really, really exact about it and you're writing it down, just name a few of those senses. And it can be a little poem. It might end up being a really nice little poem that you end up writing. And then after you do those things, you get back to your body, you get back to your senses, ground yourself, feel more grounded. Perhaps if you still feel like it's important to write about the thought, perhaps at that point, then you can write about the thought, but you're in a more grounded place, and you're grounded, and the thought has the feeling, at least maybe the thought hasn't passed, but the feelings that the thought brought up in you had passed. Feelings only last about 90 seconds. So perhaps the feelings of that thought, those extreme feelings that it brought up with you, has passed by that time, and then you're able to write about it in a way that you're not overwhelmed by the feeling. And perhaps you decide that you don't even need to write about it anymore. And once you do all those things, the thought isn't guaranteed to escape you, especially if you're like, I don't want to have this thought, then it's not guaranteed to escape you. It might still be kind of lingering around for a while, but now you're not focused on it. Now you're focused on doing other things. Now you're focused on yourself, grounding yourself. You're focused on your sensations in your body, your somatic body and being and health. And you're creating something, you're cooking, you're drawing, you're painting, you're crocheting, maybe you're just like drawing some random things on your hands. And now your focus is somewhere else. Maybe you're reading, maybe you're doing other things. Your focus is in other places, and thought might still be there, but you're not overwhelmed by it. And eventually it'll pass. Eventually you'll be thinking about other things. And it'll pass. And eventually it won't really return. At least not as often. So these are the things that I do to kind of stop a thought in its tracks, or at least shift my attention away from the thought and towards something that's more healthy for me and healing for me, and brings myself back to my body and my essence, which is always the goal. So yeah, that's what I do, and I hope that offered some grace to you, and I hope you try it out. Let me know if you try it out and if it works or it doesn't. Let me know both ways.